What's up, guys? Welcome back to Between the Pylons. I'm John Camacho. Thank you so much for watching. And guys, today we are talking about Christian Barmore out of Alabama, defensive tackle out of Alabama, who had an awesome playoffs and national championship, got a sack in both the national championship and the playoff game against Notre Dame. Dude who got like 5 tackles, 2 tackles for loss against Ohio State in the national championship game. And I mean, just really upped his status as a guy that I think the average fan certainly knows about. I know he was on my radar a little bit up to the playoff point, but I mean, just watching the national championship especially, his name was brought up a ton. He was a nightmare for that Ohio State interior line, and I was incredibly excited to watch him. I will say, very raw prospect. I mean, this is a sophomore coming out of Alabama who's played behind a ton of great Alabama defensive tackles. So he's definitely raw. He doesn't have a ton of snaps at the college level, really. And coming into the NFL, certainly going to be a raw prospect. But we're talking about a guy who is 6'5", 310 pounds, got 8 sacks and 3 forced fumbles, along with 53 tackles. And he's only a sophomore coming out of college. Let's get right over that skills chart so we can break down Barmore's game. All right, so the first thing we got to talk about is his burst. His first step off the line is so good. At 6.8, that is right under elite for me. Elite is 7 and up, and at 6.8, I mean, just so close to elite. And he is so explosive off the line. This is a guy who loves to shoot gaps. I think that's the type of defensive mindset that he needs to go into. You want to go to the teams that want their tackles shooting gaps and rushing upfield to get to the quarterback. He's a big guy who can move really well for his size. Read and react ability at a 5.2, really like. There was nothing there that said he couldn't do it. He always knows where the ball is, always seems to understand the blocking assignments and what he's facing. You know, we're talking about an Alabama defensive tackle. You know he's coached well, right? Moving on, 4.3 versus the run. Yeah, look, that's a negative grade. My average is at a 4.5, so 4.3, that is a negative grade, but it's close. And I would say that's probably just because he's a raw prospect, and I think things like this are going to need to be fixed. I certainly think he has the ability to be a space eater. He's not that right now. Like, wouldn't expect like a team like the Patriots to draft him, because the Patriots really want those big dudes that will eat up blocks, and he can. He is so strong, and he has such a strong lower half especially. So I do think he gets blocked out of a play by a single blocker a little bit too much, and double team more often than not. He definitely gets blocked down, and he's not really able to hold up consistently, but it's not like a major issue for me. It's just that it's something that I noticed a handful of times. I was like, you know, I don't think he's winning against the run enough for me to feel like good about it. I'll put it that way for sure. But that's something that I think can certainly be improved. I certainly think he can excel versus the run. At this point in his career, from the college games that I watched, I don't think he's there yet, but I certainly think he can. Play strength at a 6.6, very good. Have no issue with that at all. Positive grade. I mean, this dude is a monster. He's a physical freak and very strong guy that can kind of throw guards around, especially if the offensive lineman isn't set and isn't technically sound. I mean, he can throw guys around. Athleticism at a 6.1. You know, I mentioned it with burst and first step. This dude can move way better than any plus 300-pound man should ever be able to move. You know, he's kind of a freak in that way. Like there's no issue with that. That's the upside, and that's kind of like an aspect of why a team is going to take a Barmore early, regardless of maybe the rawness of his position, and maybe knowing, you know, his first year might not be super productive, but you know you have some traits that you just absolutely love, and that's one of them. Hand usage at a 6.9. And listen, hand usage, there's a lot that goes into that, right? The thing that put it this high for me is that, like, his hands are sledgehammers. I mean, he is just throwing people around, hitting people. His swim move is just ridiculous. Like, I have it in my notes a handful of times. He is punishing people with his hands. Just ridiculous. He has sledgehammers for hands. So strong, so powerful. And could it use some work from a technical standpoint? Yes, it absolutely could. But I mean, I think his hand usage is good. He's quick enough to where, like, I think when the technical aspect gets fixed, you still have a guy whose ability to beat you with his hands and just throw offensive linemen off balance, using more often than not just his hands and his upper body. I mean, that's going to be special. So I'm very excited about that. Leverage at a 3.3. You see, this is tied for his worst grade. I mentioned it versus the run a little bit. I think he can hold up blocks on his own fairly well. I do think he could use some work. I don't think any team that like wants a space eater, I mentioned the Patriots earlier, but like the Dolphins are another team that employs that same defensive tackle mindset. Like they want guys that will hold up blocks and create space for their linebackers to flow to the ball, right? That's the basic concept of the way they play the defensive position, and especially in that middle of the defensive line. I don't think that's what he fits. I mentioned a handful of times that he's a guy who shoots the gap. I think that's what he wants to be, and versus the run and just his leverage in general, it's not there yet. I think he can get better, especially leverage. Like that's all, I think, technique, and he has so much power from his lower body that like I'm almost surprised to put it this low, but I put it this low, and I even went back, I looked at this grade a handful of times and was like, I don't feel good about it. I'll be totally honest. Let me know in the comments if you think that this grade should be higher, and I'll be interested to hear what you think. I'm leaving it this low because I just did not see enough from what I watched. I would like to see more. Tackling at a 6, very, very good. I mean, when he gets the opportunity, he's put in a position to, get to the running back or to get to the quarterback. He doesn't miss. I mean, this is a big dude. He's not going to be denied. I mean, that's just the beginning and the end of it. Flexibility at a 6.6. I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand with shooting gaps, right? Like I've mentioned it a handful of times. That's his style, and I think that's what he's going to be, or especially early on in his career in the NFL. I saw him, shoot gaps, and even if he didn't win with just pure speed and athleticism, he had the flexibility and the power in his lower body, especially. He's a guy who's almost unrelenting when it comes to his pressuring the quarterback from the interior of that defensive line. Motor at a 3.3, and I kind of expect some pushback, and I hope I get pushback a little bit on this, because I think it's certainly fair to say that I'm wrong on this one. Let me know in the comments if you watched Alabama a lot and you didn't notice this be an issue. Let me know. But from my evaluation, it's certainly I would say the beginning of the 2020 season. There was one game that I watched that was early on in the 2020 season where it was like he was really hit or miss, and it was like, oh, this is not the same guy that I just watched in the national championship and playoff game. Like these are two different people. Like, this guy is, he's flashing what I saw consistently in those big games, but he is not doing it consistently. And I would really say that on every level, like burst and first step. Like at a 6.8, that would be an elite grade if I felt it was more consistent. Like there was just too many snaps where it was like, oh, he didn't get off the ball right, and plays over almost, like, oh, he didn't get off the ball. I think he wanted to win with speed, and he didn't get off the ball the way he needed to. Okay, plays over. He's just going to block this guy. He almost gives up on the play from the second it snaps or something like that. Like, and I could be wrong on this. And I as I said at the beginning, I implore anybody who would disagree with this particular take to say it in the comments. I'm very interested in hearing any takes on this or any opinions on this one, because I'm not sure if maybe I'm just seeing things or maybe I'm grading too harshly, but that was my take, and that's where I put that grade. I don't think it's a killer for me. It's really not, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Technique at a 3.7. I put this low because look, he really only has one pass rushing move. I mean, it's that swim. I mean, and if he doesn't win with that, it doesn't really have anything else in the bag unless it's just like pure power. He can bull rush you for sure, or just, squeezing through a gap and just winning with tenacity and grit, but not really like a pass rush repertoire from the defensive tackle position. Certainly going to need work. And also, there were certain times where I felt like he definitely needed to mirror his hands to his feet a little bit. The scouts talk about that all the time with, connecting your lower body to your upper body, as far as like every movement that you make needs to match your movement from your legs and hands. And I think, I would say there's some inconsistency there. I didn't see it consistently bad or something that I'm worried about, but some inconsistency there from what I saw, and definitely worth mentioning. But that technique thing, it just goes into if you're drafting this dude, it probably if it's my pretend team, I'm probably drafting him probably mid to late second round. Like that's probably where I would want to grab him if I'm drafting him. And I could easily see him going anywhere from 40 to 60 is kind of where I see him going. You're drafting him knowing that these kind of things need works and that he's a raw prospect. That. So that shouldn't be an issue for anybody. Pad level at a 5.7, very good. I had no issue with that at all. But guys, at the end of the day, this is another Alabama defensive tackle in a long line of Alabama defensive tackles that will probably be in the NFL for a really long time. Coming into this draft class as a guy who is incredibly physically talented and has a ton of physical ability that has to get you excited. As far as like where he fits, he really didn't play anything other than 3 technique at the at Alabama. I didn't see really any position variety at all from what I saw, and that's okay. Like, that's what he did. He's a young guy. Do I think he could maybe fit into other schemes? Sure. Like, I wouldn't want that for him. Like, I don't think you ever draft a guy and ask him to do something that you never saw him do. Like, that's never the where you want to start. So overall, let's just stick with, hey, draft him to be your 3 tech. I want him in a rotation early on. Again, I think I want him to go to a team that can afford to put in a rotation early on. I don't want him to sit there and need to play 30, 35, 40 snaps a game on the defensive tackle position every single week, because I think he will, he'll struggle early on, I think, if that were the case. But that's my take, guys. I mentioned it in the skills chart portion. I will mention again really quick just to close the show out. I do want him to go somewhere between 40 and 60. That second round is where I think his sweet spot is. Could he end up like sneaking into the first round? I've seen it mocked a whole lot where he goes in the first round. I didn't question it until I actually watched the film, and now I like watch it. I'm like, I don't think he goes in the first round. Maybe he does. Like, maybe that's where some team sees the value. It only takes one, right? And teams at the end of the first, I mean, they're all just looking for traits. Dude has some elite traits, so it wouldn't surprise me a bit. But I think I would like him more somewhere in that second round range. That feels like his sweet spot for me. But we'll see what happens, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this long, please consider hitting that subscribe button, liking this video, and following me for more draft profile videos as we lead up to the NFL draft.